Good evening, I'm Ces Oreña-Drilon.
I'm Pauline Verzosa.
And I'm Shawn Yao.
The big stories tonight, global trade takes a hit amid U.S. President Donald Trump's reciprocal tariffs, which took effect today. Goods from China, Trump's biggest target, are now subject to 104% tariff. Rates on imports to the U.S. from exporters like the European Union and Japan also rose further. We'll take a look at how the Philippines reacted to this later.
And from misogynistic remarks by male candidates, the Commission on Elections has now flagged Manila local candidate Mocha Uson over the use of a sexually suggestive campaign jingle. Meanwhile, Pasig congressional candidate Ian Sia defends his sexually charged remarks during a campaign rally by invoking freedom of speech.
And later on, we will look back at the events that led to the commemoration of the Araw ng Kagitingan every April 9 with historian Xiao Chua.
U.S. President Donald Trump's reciprocal tariffs kick in, threatening to disrupt the global economic order as we know it. The target? About 86 countries, including the Philippines, with exports to the U.S. levies ranging from 11% to a whopping 104%. And across world financial markets, it looks like more miserable days are ahead.
China is bearing the most brunt, with duties nearly doubled on import goods at 104%. Beijing says it will stand up to Washington's, quote, blackmail and bullying, and promises to retaliate. Now, amid prodding from world leaders and even allies in America, Trump is not standing down.
He has since given mixed signals on whether his tariffs will remain in the long term, saying on numerous occasions that he is open to negotiations. For now and for Trump, this is one bitter pill that the world just has to swallow.
I don't want anything to go down, but sometimes you have to take medicine to fix something. I spoke to a lot of leaders, European, Asian, from all over the world. They're dying to make a deal, but I said, we're not going to have deficits with your country.
Back here in the Philippines, government has relatively downplayed the impact of Trump's tariffs. Let's get the insights of Dan La Chica, president of SEPI, or the Semiconductor and Electronics Industries in the Philippines Foundation Incorporated. Good evening to you, Dan, and welcome to the Big Story. What is the assessment of the industry, the semiconductor and electronics industry?
Well, good evening, ladies, and thanks for having me. Actually, if you look at it, and I'm talking about the reciprocal tariffs, right? The Philippines is actually in a very good position. We're at 17%, and compared to China at 34%, which you said the net effect is 104%. But compared to our ASEAN neighbors, our big competitors, we're still very low. And so the even better news is that for the semiconductor industry, we're way below the radar, as we don't really have any big tariffs to worry about for today anyway. And hopefully this doesn't change much in the near future.
So, Dan, you share the assessment of the government that this isn't going to affect us so much, although we don't exist in a vacuum. You know, it will be affected by what's happening around the globe.
Actually, we're in a much better place. I was speaking with a couple of companies who were looking at the Philippines as an option. Both of them were in China, and they're looking to move some of their products out of China. And of course, the Philippines is a worthwhile destination. And this was even before the announcement of the reciprocal tariffs. And so even today, that has been confirmed. And, for example, you look at Taiwan at 32%, China at 34% for the reciprocal tariffs. Even Japan is at 24%. And these are all based on the trade deficits. And as you know, with the Philippines, with a net deficit of 8%, that's really the main reason, one of the main reasons why we're at the low of 17%.
So the U.S. is our second largest market, correct? Compared to next to Hong Kong. So
yes.
do we look for other markets for our goods,
Well,
semiconductors and electronics in particular?
clearly, and not just the market for exports, but also for a source of raw materials. China still seems to be our biggest source of materials. And definitely, well, if you look at it, I guess one question would be, what should be our posture with the United States concerning these tariffs? There are three options. One is to retaliate, just like China is doing. The other is to do nothing, which is always an option. And the second would be to continue discussions, negotiations to, for example, establish an FTA, free trade agreement with the United States, or inclusion, re-inclusion in the GSP. And as of this point, the best option probably would be to do nothing because we're enjoying the lower tariffs, the lower reciprocal tariffs. And in fact, it's a wait and see game. Let's see what the United States does because on one hand, Trump might change his mind. But again, as of now, it's better not to do anything and just ride on the wave of the lower tariffs, but at the sidelines, continue discussions and negotiations with establishing a free trade agreement and or re-inclusion in the GSP.
Dan, if I'm not mistaken, you've been advocating for that policy, a free trade agreement or a TAA with the United States. This must be like, if off the top of my head, since 2018. Has there been no progress considering that conductors and chips make up like 60% of total Philippine exports?
Yes, not as yet. And I know Secretary Chris Roque and the DTI folks have been working on it. With the change in administration, I know the former President Biden was open for discussion, but right now President Trump might be distracted with a lot of other things. So the discussion just has to continue. The implication of not having an FTA is, when we have companies that deal with the federal government, they won't be allowed to export, their products because they're not TAA compliant. And so we're losing millions of dollars every year because of that. So companies would be looking for countries with TAA agreements with the United States. So we want to plug that gap, that hole, and that's why we want to pursue the FTA.
Okay, well, now might be the best time to pursue that, or at least you have some leverage on the DTI. But Dan, you previously predicted flat growth for your sector this year, 2025, even a decline of 10%. Have you readjusted your projections for 2025, given this the Liberation Day tariffs have already come to play?
We had our biggest year in 2022 at $49.5 billion. Since then, we've contracted by 8% in 2023 and another 6% in 2024. And so, looking forward in 2025, we were projecting a flat growth. But then, with these developments, as well as the Create More Act, we're hopefully going to be at least at modest or flat growth, if not positive. I was just in South Korea with the Create More roadshow headed by Secretary Go, and the response was really favorable. And like I said, we've got inquiries on the new business climate in the Philippines, the ease of doing business, the improved incentives taken in by the Create More Act. And so we're looking forward. I don't want to jinx it, but I'm even looking for maybe a modest growth on top of the flat growth that we projected for 2025.
Mm-hmm. And then when it comes to semiconductor manufacturing, I mean, for years, we weren't really able to put up all these front-end wafer fabrication facilities because of high power costs. But now, is there a way to offer low secure energy and security at a low cost to all these investors, considering we now have lower tariffs compared to our ASEAN neighbors?
That's a good question. There have been a couple of other developments that have come about. The first one, well, like I said, the passing of the Create More Act. And then in addition to that, our president has declared the semiconductor electronics industry priority industry. And on the tails of that, there was an administrative order number 31 from the Office of the President creating a semiconductor and industry, and electronics advisory council, which would help facilitate the investments and remove the roadblocks. And you're correct, we still have high power costs, high labor and logistics costs. But again, the government is actively pursuing remedial measures for that. I mean, clearly, for power, the priority of the Department of Energy, Secretary Lotilla, really is to ensure that there's adequate demand so we don't have brownouts or shortages, especially during the summer months. But then again, we've looked at that, and with the government, working with the government, looking at possible options, near-term options. And one of them is to, for example, have an embedded power supply in an industrial zone. That's why you can reduce the power by taking away the distribution cost, the transmission cost, and even the VAT in an eco zone. And so that hopefully will be a model for reducing the power cost. And as far as the logistics cost, there's the Luzon Economic Corridor that basically links the Subic port with the Clark Airport with the industrial zones along the way, all the way to Batangas. And that's why one of the, there's an eco zone in that area that's being touted as the model of what can be done nationally in terms of lower power costs, lower logistics costs. And of course, continuing efforts to improve the ease of doing business will also help.
And speaking of the ease of doing business, I mean, how crucial is it that our government's policies are somewhat stable and predictable? Because I believe that was a concern of investors before.
Well, that has been a major problem with the previous administration. In fact, we've seen some capital flight because, we have a law and that's changed. And so that basically rocks the stability of the whole infrastructure of the whole government, right? So much so for sovereign guarantees. But again, with the new administration, the efforts that they're doing to restore the confidence of the investors, to improving the FDIs, and hopefully we'll surpass that. It's just a matter of getting the show on the road, literally. That's why we're having this road show led by Secretary Frederick Go and DTI and, even the other cabinet members, so that we can announce to the world that we're back in business, we're open for business, and the Philippines, especially with the tariffs that we've been talking about, is the ideal place for their expansions and new investments.
Going back to that silver lining that you see and even government refers to and other analysts, how immediate can that be implemented? Or you mentioned that there are already 2 interested parties to move their operations to the Philippines?
Yes, there are. Unfortunately, I can't announce their names. They're public companies.
Of course,
but I see this just as at the beginning, especially because, like I said, this came about even with the just speculation of increased tariffs from their respective manufacturing sites. But now with the formal announcement of the increased tariffs, the reciprocal tariffs, I would expect to see more, coupled with the road shows that I mentioned is being done by the government through the leadership of Secretary Go. And of course, DTI is involved, PEZA is involved, and we'll hopefully see more of that coming on board.
So this is the reason why you're seeing maybe a growth this year instead of a flat performance for 2025.
Yes, that gives us some ray of hope, some optimism, and like I said, the advisory council, I'm chaired by Secretary Go, and the vice chairman would be DTI with other cabinet members. Hopefully, we'll see that get into gear real soon, coupled with the action items, parallel action items that the government is doing. So I'm hopeful that we'll see at least a modest growth this year. But again, for now, we're remaining with our flat growth projection, but we'll update that to the course of the year.
Dan, I'd like to be candid with you. A lot of people are scratching their heads about this optimism that seems to be coming from the Philippines alone. Everybody's so worried about the uncertainty about these levies and its impact on the global economy. And here in the Philippines, we're really optimistic.
Conservatively optimistic is how I describe it, but because it's a very complex economic system, right? It's a global system. I'll give you an example. We might have, for instance, low tariffs for electronic parts, automotive electronic parts specifically. But if the rest of the world, especially countries that export steel or export automotive the vehicles, then, you know, with the high tariffs, the demand could possibly be much, much lower than they projected. And what does that mean? It will affect the supply chain. It will affect the automotive electronics parts that are coming out of the Philippines. So even if we have the benefit of the low tariffs, if the global demand for such product lessens, then obviously that's going to have effect on the supply of automotive electronics parts. So it's just an example of how complicated this supply chain works and the impact of countries with having different kinds of levels of tariffs.
Yeah, but that's exactly the point, right? I mean,
you don't see that affecting the performance this year of our semicon and electronics industry.
Well, like you said, we just don't rely on the United States, as you mentioned earlier. We need to diversify the export destinations. We need to ensure that we identify the product lines that are not as susceptible to this global challenges and work on that. But that's why I was saying earlier, we're being conservative with flat growth, although there's really a silver lining, so to speak, like you said, and there's upside on how we can grow this 2025.
okay, but Dan, a lot of economists are actually really worried because the last time we saw this level of trade war, quote unquote, was right after the Great Depression, right around the Great Depression, and that, of course, precipitated World War II. Although we don't want to fearmonger, but we're wondering, you know, like, are there any mitigating things that are going on to? We understand that we got low tariffs, but again, if the entire world economy suffers, eventuality, have there been meetings with the members of SAPI, and what are their top line concerns right now?
Well, I've spoken with our members, and obviously we've talked to our government partners. You know, in situations like this, it always pays to look at the different angles, look at the worst case situations and alternatives and options to have mitigating plans. But like I said, we just need to diversify the market. Externally, we have to diversify our market. And internally, we just need to improve our cost of doing business, the ease of doing business, and our efficiency, production efficiency in our manufacturing lines. So we have to look at all fronts and not be complacent just because we have lower tariffs.
What other markets for our semicon exports are you guys eyeing as an industry group?
Well, there's Europe, for instance. The top markets, as you mentioned earlier, United States, even China is still a big market. And what we can see as opportunities for improvement would be in Europe because, for instance, Germany is only importing about 6% of our products. Netherlands about 5%, and some European countries haven't even heard of the capabilities of the Philippines, just like France, for example. Last year, I was with the presidential delegation to the Czech Republic, and we signed an MOU with their Electronics Association. They haven't even heard of the Philippines. So we see that as potential opportunities to develop our export market in addition to the existing ones in Asia and the United States.
All right, thank you so much for talking to us. Dan La Chica, President of the Semiconductor and Electronics Industries in the Philippines Foundation, Incorporated.
It's a pleasure, Seth, Shawn, and...
Now, in other news, we're finally hearing from a couple of midterm candidates recently called out by the Commission on Elections. First is Mocha Uson, who is running for councilor in Manila. The COMELEC wrote her a letter for what it called were, quote, sexually suggestive elements in her campaign. The poll body was referring to Uson's campaign jingle. In response, Uson said she fully recognizes the importance of maintaining a respectful, inclusive, and age-appropriate tone in all campaign communications. She also acknowledged issues raised by COMELEC and vows to stop the use of, quote, materials in question.
Unlike Mocha Uson, Pasig City congressional candidate attorney Ian Sia is on defensive mode. The COMELEC has asked Sia last week to explain a remark he made in a campaign sortie that single mothers can sleep with him once a year. In his reply, attorney Sia invoked the freedom of speech, saying that while his words may sound brash, his speech in its entirety falls within this right. Sia said he had no intention to discriminate, exclude, restrict, demean, or harass female solo parents. The COMELEC has sent Sia a second show cause order after another video circulated of him body-shaming his staff member.
Remember, Shawn, you had just asked the question, what about women?
Exactly.
Ayan. Sinagot ka ni Mocha.
I'm so sorry, Mocha. Kasalanan ko ba to?
Hindi naman.
De, biro lang, biro lang. Pero ito nga, no, yung body shaming, we were also talking about this, yung in his defense, no, attorney Sia, after making that solo parent crack, he defended himself by body shaming his chief of staff, who is the wife of his friend. So I want to hear what he has to say about that.
For me, it's quite ironic that all this is happening just a month after we celebrated Women's Month.
Yeah.
So I'm curious.
I mean, shame on him. Freedom of speech?
That's
But
what
you
he's
know,
invoking.
in fairness to Mocha, gusto ko yung sagot niya, okay, I will stop using the materials in question, which is, I think that's the kind of predictable or what we expect the replies to be.
All right,
Be a little more contrite.
Yes.
Humble.
Humble. And I won't do it again, diba? Sorry, I won't do it again.
Accountability. All right, but for now, we're going to take a quick break. Coming up next on The Big Story, a day after Canlaon volcano's explosive eruption, affected residents are now having problems finding safe drinking water. We'll get live updates from Negros when we return. Keep it here.
You're watching The Big Story here on One News. Residents affected by ash fall from the Canlaon volcano have started cleaning up their surroundings, but they're running into problems due to lack of clean water supply. Carrie Cater reports to us live from La Carlota City in Negros Occidental, one of the most affected towns by yesterday's eruption. Carrie, how's the volcano activity today? Is there continuous ash fall still?
Says the situation is a bit calmer now compared to when the Canlaon volcano erupted yesterday. But it's no reason for officials to be complacent and put their guards down. Up to this afternoon, some areas were still covered in ash due to the ashfall that happened, which was brought about by the eruption. One of the areas most hit were two barangays, namely Hagimit and San Miguel, where residents were even forced to get water from the ash-colored river. That's, as you mentioned, supply has been running low even in the past years, and this has been not yet addressed by local officials, so that's what residents have been complaining about, and the ashfall only made their situation worse. So we saw some of them scooping water from the river to use them not only to clean their roofs which were covered in ash, but also to even take a bath and wash their dishes. This has raised concern among authorities since this may have an impact on their health. But so far, there have been no reports on people who have suffered from different kinds of illnesses due to possible water contamination. Still, they have been warning residents not to use water which are not clean, especially those from areas which were affected by the ashfall, since this could have an impact on their health, as we mentioned. Also, we went around other barangays, including Araal, but this was one of those who were covered in ashes, which was covered in ash as well. Pero kanina, mga bandang hapon, wala naman na masyado tayong nakita na aboroon kasi tumulong din yung mga opisyal sa paglilinis. They have deployed water tankers, and drinking water were also supplied to barangays that have no supply nga nung clean water na sinasabi natin. Kabilang na dyan yung Hamigit at San Miguel na kumukuha pa sa ilog at yung kinukuhanan daw nila ng maiinom na tubig malayo-layo pa. Ang sabi naman nung lokal na opisyal tungkol dyan ay tutulungan nga nila na ibigyan pa ng supply ito para sa mga susunod na araw sa tubig, at meron na rin daw silang pinaplanong programa nang sa ganon ay magkaroon na rin ng stable na water supply, lalo na yung area nga na nabanggit natin na matagal na talagang walang mapagkuhanan ng malinis na tubig.
Carrie, give us an idea. Are you talking of residents who are in their homes who have been affected and evacuees from the zone affected by Canlaon? Anong kaibhan? May evacuees ba?
Those who have been getting water from ash-affected areas or those affected by the ashfall, these are all residents, but they are close to Canlaon but outside the 6-kilometer radius. So, pero mahirap pa rin yung supply nila kasi nga parang hindi pa nagagawan ng maayos na supply. Kumbaga yung linya ng tubig hindi pa raw naaayos, kaya hirap sila sa pagsalok at pag-igib ng tubig sa mga lugar na yan. As to the evacuees, as of now here in La Carlota City, which is one of the most affected nga nung mga ashfall, over 1,600 residents yung nananatili sa evacuation centers. But the number, ito ay since December 2024 pa, or when Mount Canlaon last erupted before yesterday. So, nadagdagan lang daw ng 4 na pamilya kahapon, pero the rest, 4 na buwan nang nananatili roon. Hindi pa rin kasi sila pinapabalik since monitoring is continuous for the activity nung volcano, and nasa alert level 3 pa rin ang bulkan.
All right, we thank you, Carrie, for your report. That was Carrie Cater of News 5 reporting from La Carlota City in Negros Occidental. Do keep safe.
Meanwhile, the Department of Foreign Affairs confirms one of the 4 Filipinos missing after the 7.7 magnitude earthquake in Myanmar has been found. Sadly, though, the victim, who was found in Mandalay, did not survive. For now, the DFA refused to disclose the Filipino's identity, but said that the family has already been informed. They requested for privacy for now as they grieve the loss of their loved one. Authorities also assured work is underway to account for the 3 remaining Filipinos missing. So far, the death toll from the March 28 earthquake now stands at almost 4,000.
And over in The Hague, former President Rodrigo Duterte's camp has filed their observations to the application process recommended by the International Criminal Court Registry for drug war victims who want to participate in the inquiry. Among them, the lack of stringent identification requirements. Mon Gualvez with the details.
Attorney Nicholas Kaufman was spotted yesterday visiting his client, former President Rodrigo Duterte, at the ICC detention center. He gave updates on the case, including their answer to the registry's recommendations on the application of drug war victims who wanted to participate in the investigation.
Respecting everybody's right to be heard. That is what should happen during the trial. It should not be manipulated for whatever political end.
First, they criticized the recommendation to give victims as many options as possible in providing their identity. According to Kaufman, the use of varied and insufficiently verified identity documents could lead to misidentification, double counting, and the inclusion of false victims, issues that could trigger unnecessary and time-consuming litigation. He also said the registry failed to explain why such deviation is appropriate or even necessary in this case, other than the vague assertion that there exists a backlog in the distribution of national identity cards. Kaufman said the pretrial chamber should insist on the production of a national identity card and/or a passport containing an up-to-date photograph, or, in the absence thereof, identification documents accepted in the staggered fashion mandated by the Social Security System of the Republic of the Philippines. Digong's camp also criticized the registry's proposal that lawyers appointed by victim applicants participate on behalf of their clients, while the Office of Public Counsel for Victims, or OPCV, represents the general interests of unrepresented applicants. Kaufman insists this will result in twice the number of submissions before the chamber and impact Duterte's right to a speedy judicial process. Duterte's lead counsel is insisting that his client's rights are considered just as much as the interests of the victims are upheld. Attorney Kaufman also assured that he will fight for the case of the former Philippine president until it ends. Prosecution is yet to file a formal answer, but one of the victim lawyers blasted how Kaufman thinks the IDs he's requiring from the victims, who are allegedly among the poorest of the poor in the Philippines. Attorney Joel Butuyan also thinks it's abhorrent that Duterte's camp would insist on the representation of the alleged victims of his mass murder. Meanwhile, Hanilet Avancenia says the former president has forgiven those who they think were behind his arrest. But she insinuates that there would definitely be repercussions.
Akala nila yun ang that will put him down. Kamali sila. Wrong move. They will never be given the chance by the Filipino people.
Tomorrow, their daughter Veronica is celebrating her 21st birthday, and she has no other plans than to celebrate it with her father.
My wishes are simple. I want good health and strength from my father. That goes for emotional strength, mental strength, and physical strength. And of course, just to be with my family. That is more than enough for me.
On the other hand, Kaufman admits attorney Harry Roque has indeed expressed interest in becoming part of Duterte's legal team.
Harry Roque wants to be a member of the team. He supports the president. We've benefited greatly from Harry Roque's advice.
Kaufman declined to confirm if Roque is one of the two Filipino lawyers who's helping them. Reporting from The Hague, Netherlands, Mon Gualvez, we are One News.
We're pausing for another quick break for now, but when we return, we'll be taking a look back at the stories that enshrined April 9th as the Day of Valor in the Philippines. Historian Xiao Chua will be gracing us with his presence next. Keep it here.
Welcome back and thank you for staying with us here in the Big Story. Today marks the 83rd commemoration of the Day of Valor or Araw ng Kagitingan. President Bongbong Marcos led the ceremony honoring those who fought and died for the country during World War II. Marcos offered flowers at the Dambana ng Kagitingan or Shrine of Valor in Mount Samat, Bataan, dedicated to the heroes of the Battle of Bataan. He was joined by representatives from Japan and the United States, along with remaining war veterans and families of fallen soldiers. In his speech, Marcos honored the courage and sacrifice of Filipino and American soldiers who fought during the war and emphasized the importance of unity to achieve peace.
We celebrate today Araw ng Kagitingan, the valor, the courage, and the sacrifice that is demonstrated by every single Filipino every single day. Peace cannot be attained by one person, by one country alone. And that we have to bring together all the parties that are involved.
In a separate message, Vice President Sara Duterte said that as the country faces challenges of unity and progress, Filipinos should be inspired by the heroism of the World War II veterans. And following today's ceremonies honoring our war heroes, Let's take a step back to understand the deeper meaning behind this today. And joining us is historian Shawn Yao. Welcome to the Big Story, Professor. Isang magiting na araw sa iyo. Sariwain siguro natin, what are the
Makasaysayang umaga, Ma'am Ces, Shawn, Pauline, and to everyone.
What are the historical events that led to this day in 1942? And please include in your answer whether it's apt. You know, we've been debating this for many, many years. Kung bakit, kung kailan pa bumagsak ang Bataan, doon natin sinasariwa ang valor ng mga Pilipino.
Well, first of all, remember that Japan attacked us in 1941 December, and whole of Southeast Asia. And what happened was, by February, the Japanese already got a lot of Asia, and the Filipino forces, na outnumbered, MacArthur ordered all the USAF forces, Filipino and Americans, to be stationed in Bataan. So we will defend just one peninsula, and that is Bataan. This is to frustrate the plans of the Japanese for a total invasion of Asia. So by keeping Bataan standing until we can. And we were able to fulfill that until April 9. That's why even if it's a story of defeat, because we were the last one to stand, and the last one to fall, I mean, against the Japanese, then we became like a sort of inspiration, like the mascot of the fight for freedom, support from people. And that's why they said, remember Bataan, remember Corregidor. So yun po yung kwento why we emphasize, even if it's like a defeat, we emphasize the valor. Yung valor kasi kagitingan means that despite the enemies na napaka-impossible odds, we face them, and kumbaga lumaban pa rin tayo.
So kumbaga pwede nating we could have chosen to call this day the Fall of Bataan and commemorate that, but instead we choose to be optimistic. Yun yung pinagdedebatehan natin, yung optimism ng Pinoy. And we decided to focus on their valor, yung kagitingan. Ganun ba?
Yes, dati naman kasi Bataan Day ang tawag dyan, But eventually, parang syempre, kasi Bataan was really like a famous talaga do sa generation na yon. But of course, with a new generation, people might think that, Bataan is like a synonymous to defeat. That's why we have to change it to kagitingan. Perhaps that's what I was thinking. Wala pa naman ako noon. But maganda rin kasi remember that we are honoring not just the veterans of Bataan and Corregidor, yung tinatawag na mga bastards of Bataan kasi iniwan ng Amerika diba? But all of the Battle of Bataan kasi, after that defeat, it strengthened the national guerrilla force that eventually won the war for us with the Allied forces. So, ang nakikita natin dito, we commemorate all the veterans, not just the veterans of World War II, pati yung veterans of Korean War, Mindanao War, the veterans of the Revolution. And we see this as just one step to victory. Sabi nga ni Salud Algabre, the Amazona leader in Cabuyao, Laguna, walang himagsikang nabibigo. Ang lahat ay hakbang tungo sa tamang landas. Parang yun yung nakikita natin dito. We see the victory of our heroes despite the defeats that we have had.
And Shaw, one of the stories and faces that really stood out for me dito sa Battle ng Bataan is the one of Jose Cabalfin Calugas. Siya yung Pinoy na tumakbo daw ng 1 kilometer para lang umabot dun sa isang bakante na field gun, para kalabanin nga ito nga mga Hapon. And he even got a U.S. Congressional Medal of Honor award for that. Just tell us the significance of what he did.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, well, basically, kumbaga parang it was a feat, na parang ang dating nga kakaunti na nga lang yung kanilang mga resources, kakaunti na lang yung mga bala, yung tao, pero ang nangyari nga doon, he was able to do that feat despite all the odds, yan ang kaya napansin ng Amerika yan at binigyan agad siya nung medalya, Yan si Kalugas isa sa mga isa sa mga notable figures sa Battle of Bataan. Significant yan kasi parang yun na nga we tend to focus on the defeat of yung death march which is terrible, no? Terrible, and we have to remember that. Pero hindi natin nakita na ang dami rin mga battles na yung mga Pinoy ay nagdingning. Halimbawa, one of the battles there is yung mga battle of when we frustrated the Japanese, they cannot enter doon sa first line of defense. And then we have the Oryok-Bagak line. We also have the Battle of the Points and the Battle of the Pockets. Even the Igorot warriors were part of the defense of Bataan, no? Yun nga, kaya nga nag-hold tayo ng 3 months. But yun nga, the problem was the Americans left us kasi they decided to have Hitler first kasi they cannot have war on 2 fronts, Pacific and Atlantic Ocean. So Atlantic Ocean na muna. And anyways, the Japanese surrounded the whole of Asia. That's why American forces cannot really come to the aid of the people in Bataan. So talagang naiiwan talaga tayo doon sa laban na yan.
Yun yung naalala ko about the fall of Bataan is parang iniwan tayo ni General MacArthur. Parang ganun yung nagyari. Although we know na masakit yun at labag sa kalooban niya, di ba? Pero parang nung iniwan niya tayo, do you think ano yung mga lessons that modern day Filipinos can eke out from that experience? Kasi medyo parang, kumbaga ngayon, pelikula na lang or TV show na lang, series na lang ang World War II.
Okay, ganito po, no? Ayoko pong magsalita ng masakit, pero siguro isa-summarize ko na lang mas madali, no? Ang tutulong lang sa Pilipino talaga ay ang kapwa Pilipino. Let us not depend on foreigners to defend us. Yes, perhaps they can help us, pero yung sabihin mo totally that they're going to defend us once we are at war, even with mutual defense treaties, of course they're going to think of their interests. Look at what happened in Ukraine, di ba? So what we need to do is actually to always pursue the path of peace and diplomacy until we can, despite standing for our, our principles and our beliefs as a country and our sovereignty. But yun na nga yes, we are peaceful people. But when we are, pinakitunayan din natin ng World War II, the lesson also was, despite the fact that the Japanese was a bigger enemy, the guerrilla movement became effective in eventually gaining freedom for, excuse me po, gaining freedom for us. So I guess that's also the hopeful thing about it, that when Filipinos, they are, kapag tayo bayan ng magiliw, pero sa manlulupig, hindi tayo pasisiil, at hopefully that will also happen. But, of course, we all hope for peace and never again to war.
Yan ang magandang mensahe, I think. Matuto tayong tumayo sa sariling paa.
And, they've done it before. Diba? We've showed the world na nagawa naman pala natin dati.
Pero ito siya, curious ako. I mean, how can we still exemplify valor, kagitingan in our daily lives? Kasi, I mean, nowadays, diba, the younger generation, medyo nawawala na rin yung essence ng araw na to, yung holiday. Kumbaga, for them, they just look forward to having a day of rest. But how can we really commemorate the essence of yung araw ng kagitingan?
First of all, we just have to be patient telling these stories. You are helping us because you are interviewing us and helping us tell the story and bring it out to our young people in the social media and in YouTube. Pero ako, I cannot demand anymore to the ordinary worker, to the ordinary government employee, you in the media, na when you go up, when you wake up in the morning, di ba? You go to your work, you do your best. I mean, ang hirap na nung nangyayari sa atin. That's the valor that we show every day, and that valor is contributing to the GDP of our country, di ba? Every good thing that you do, every kita that you will make, it contributes to the national development. When we do our best, Andres Bonifacio said, ang kasipagan sa paghahanap buhay ay siyang tunay na pagmamahal sa sarili, asawa, anak, kapatid o kabayan. I think when we do our best every day, I cannot demand anymore to the ordinary man. They've been doing a lot already. Now, hopefully, we galvanize all these efforts into a better government, hopefully, sana in the future.
And one last question, Shao. Kunwari, gustong nating ma-impart sa mga anak, pamangkin, younger generation, kumbaga, the lessons of this, in a more literal sense compared to Pauli's question, what kind of, kumbaga, tourist spots or historical spots can we go to really, kumbaga, get a feel of Araw ng Kagitingan? I guess Bataan would be the first.
Mount Sama.
Well, we can let them march for 100 kilometers. Ano? Maybe they will fit. I'm joking, of course, but pero di ba? I think you should try going to the Capas National Shrine in Capas Tarlac. Diyan yung Camp O'Donnell, diyan yung yung concentration camp ng mga forces. Meron pong train dyan na makikita ninyo na yan po'y pinaglagyan ng mga prisoners noon of war. Diyan sa train na yan, dyan sila nagsiksikan. Parang makikita nyo, very poignant. And then, when you go to the memorial at Capas, you will see the very, very long wall, granite wall of the men who fought during the war. No? Nakalista sila doon, ang mga veterans natin. So, baka may mahanap silang lolo doon, o kahit wala, no, you just see the sacrifice of a lot of people just to give us freedom. I think Capas National Shrine, aside from Mount Samat, is the perfect place for you to feel that heroism of our veterans, mga lolo at lola veterano natin.
Thank you so much, Chao, for your inspiring words. That was historian Chao Chua explaining to us the day we are marking today.
Now, moving on to advancements in defense, the Philippine Navy and Philippine Coast Guard have received new assets. Defense Secretary Gibot Eudoro led the Philippine Navy in receiving BRP Miguel Malvar at the Subic Naval Base yesterday. The newest guided missile corvette is part of the AFP modernization program and was purchased from Hyundai Heavy Industries in South Korea. It is equipped with advanced technology. It is expected to strengthen the Navy's anti-ship, anti-submarine, and anti-aircraft capabilities. Its sister ship, BRP Diego Silang, was also launched and is expected to arrive after undergoing sea trials. The Philippine Coast Guard also received a boost to its maritime surveillance missions. Australia donated 20 drones or unmanned aerial systems worth 34 million pesos. The drones include short, medium, and long-range units, which will enhance the PCG's operations, especially in the West Philippine Sea. Admiral Ronnie Gavan, commandant of the PCG, received the drones from Australian Ambassador HKU in Mariveles, Bataan.
For our big picture tonight, we celebrate something else apart from the Day of Valor, Araw ng Kagitingan. This time, it's a milestone of the PBA, the Philippine Basketball Association. On April 9, exactly 50 years ago, the first ever Pinoy-style pro basketball match happened between the Concepcion Carrier and Mariwasa Noritake teams. And on the PBA's golden anniversary today, don't forget the other teams that first stepped on that hard court back in 1975 of CFC, Royal True Orange, 7-Up, Tanduay, UTEX, and of course, who can forget the iconic rivals, Crispa and Toyota. Fast forward to tonight with the PBA anniversary doubleheader now happening at the equally historic Rizal Memorial Coliseum. Fans were given treats like PBA at 50 commemorative t-shirts, lower box seats priced at 50 pesos, and general admissions ticket at 30 pesos. For those born in the on the PBA's birth year of 1975, free entrance tonight. The first game is between Magnolia and Converge, and the second game is between San Miguel and Meralco, which will have a twist. Players are gonna be wearing retro jerseys.
I love the retro jerseys.
Wait, bakit ang haba ng shorts?
Ganun talaga.
Hindi! Hindi!
Maybe ayaw ng
Super
players.
sikip,
Super
shorts,
diba?
Noon.
Maybe the players didn't want to sport the short shorts.
I'll agree. I'll give it to them. Okay, the font is vintage, pero di ba ayaw magpakita ng legs? Bakit ba nauso yung mahabang shorts?
Oo nga, dati super tight.
Super tights, mahaba yung socks.
Diba?
Oo
Mix.
Correct, correct.
We should
You
have
know,
a
I
historian
was
explain that.
first year high school. Oh my God.
Crispa Redmanizers and Toyota.
Yeah, 75.
Oo. You were first year high school. Sinong favorite team mo? Did you watch? Were you
Crispa.
interested?
I was a Crispa fan.
Wow.
Not Toyota.
Not Toyota. Favorite player?
Favorite player.
Wag mo nang tanungin kasi mga matagal na. Okay na.
Ikaw, favorite player?
Mabubuking.
Wala, alam mo, nung panahon ko,
Okay, Bogs Adornado, di ba?
Bogs
Chris
Adornado,
pa yun?
yes.
He
Lumabas
had,
din.
never mind.
Sige na!
Di ba tight ang shorts? So,
Yes. Nice, nice bum.
Nice bum.
Pareho tayo nang tinitingnan. That's why I decry these long, baggy shorts.
Yeah. What's up with
Petition to
that?
bring back the short shorts.
You have to petition it to the PBA, okay? We want the short shorts back. But for tonight, that's it for the big story.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.
Thank you for watching. Good night.